hope we have some time today to kind of get to the bottom of how that kind of came about. So, Pablo, you've had a pretty amazing run of late of these incredibly intense portraits. You know, I love Neruda, yours was some time ago, and of course Jackie recently, really wowed audiences all over the world. What attracted you to Lady Di, to Diana? What made her so necessary to become your subject?
Well, first of all, thank you. This is the first Q&A we've ever done.
Oh, wow.
So it's just very
welcome.
Thank you. Well, we in the process of Jackie, we discovered that maybe focusing in a very few days through a very intense crisis, we can get to know someone really well instead of just going through their entire life. And I was joking in the beginning about my mom, but it's true. With my brother, we thought of like making something that could relate to her and her generation, and then we saw that that might be a chance to make this movie, and we called our friends in the UK, and there was interest to get it made. And then Steve and I wrote this very precise script, and that gave me, I think, a lot of possibilities to make a movie that has a structure that is quite strange. It's very classic. You see the structure has 3 acts, but at the same time, I think it's crisis, ghost, healing as a process. So those blocks were very possible, and I don't know. I keep thinking that there's something very enigmatic in Diana's presence. So no matter what you read and what you get to know about her, you won't really know exactly what happened.
It's kind of like no matter how much you hear, it's a little bit like Jackie decades before, that no matter how much you hear, no matter how much you see her, you still feel there's more to get.
Yeah, because she was never really transparent. And it's a very strange thing, because you know so many things as you say, and then you really look, and you're not really getting there. And that creates a very strange magnetism. And she was a woman that was in a very unusual circumstances, aristocracy, royalty, privilege, you name it. But at the same time, she was very normal.
Yeah.
And someone very ordinary. And that's how, I don't know, again, my mom, she was like being like her forever.
Was she a Lady Di follower? Was she someone who...
well, pretty much everyone I know.
Yeah.
So, and in that exercise was very relevant who was going to play that mystery that could sort of capture that magnetism and let you get in just up to that point that you don't know. And that's what I think this lady here can.
Yeah, I mean, we just spent the last... basically spent the last 5 minutes talking about how incredibly difficult it is to sort of reimagine Diana and sort of think through how you actually can approach her. How daunting was that for you? I mean, so when you actually encountered the role, you encountered Pablo, and you started to talk about it, what was going on in your mind initially about how to kind of get to her?
I mean, our initial conversations didn't really consist of any more than just, because when I spoke to Pablo at first, I hadn't read the script yet. He just was like, have you ever considered this person? I'm gonna make a movie, I think it's you. And I was like, I think you're fucking wildly crazy. But literally actually approaching, trying to absorb a person who was fatefully unknowable is a trip, because everyone has a version, and every memoir is different and the same, and some of the pieces of her don't fit together at all. Yeah, I don't know. I think the script is, like you said, so concisely written, and I kind of sifted through and just made sure that there was nothing completely wrong, because for anyone who actually is like really close to the details of the story, which there are a lot of people that are, I myself am like the furthest from that. I couldn't be more of an outsider, but for anyone who may have known for a fact that she hated smoking, that was a huge part of one of the original drafts, is that she would come out with Maggie and like, you know, have a cigarette, and I was like, we just can't do that. Like another, you know, these are things that don't really matter, but like, you know, did she say fuck? A lot of people were like, you know, never in my life did I ever hear her curse, and then there were, you know, staff members that were like, she fucking tore me down. So, you know, as long as nothing was completely just absolutely unequivocally wrong, it was impossible to know her, and that's sort of the saddest thing about her, because the craving is so palpable. She just is like reaching out at all times. She's just like, she comes out to here in every picture, in every interview, anything. And mostly, you know, I'm not like a mom yet, but the one thing that she's ever really viscerally sure of, and you know, I don't know her, but judging from where I'm standing, she had such little control over her life, and nothing was unconditional ever, and everything was this negotiation, and sort of like, you know, just the highs and lows were so gnarly. Like, she was just like the most loved person in the world and the most rejected at the same time. Like, just couldn't really like define her own power, but she definitely felt it, because she's fucking crazy. She would definitely wield it sometimes, like a banshee. But then sometimes feels so vulnerable and small. But with her children, it was sureness. It was just the most fucking sure thing ever. And yeah, so I think with the things that I could really hold on to, and that was something that he was obviously like, you know, really good at helping me with, because he's a dad, and like it just making sure that that little nucleus was like just rock solid. Was whatever, one of kind of the hardest stuff. So like the accent was a bitch, and the kid thing was also something that I was like, you little fuckers, I need to you need to be with me. Yeah, other than just like observing her and seeing like, you know, the best that you could, like just learn as much as you can, and then try and forget about it, because to do her justice would definitely be, the most important thing was to kind of lose control at the same time, because she was so at odds with any type of like choice or whatever, which is why it was in the movie makes a choice also.
Right. Thank you. That's amazing. You know, part of that is you're talking about the very, very many ways that you have to, that require to actually get into this character and to make this movie happen. You're also, the camera's right here for so much of this film, and so I'd have to imagine that Clementon, the cinematographer, and Pablo and Kristen, you guys must have just worked so hard to make those scenes still be fresh and intimate and kind of radical in the way that they are. I'd love to know how that kind of happened on set.
Well, you know what happens? It's very interesting. There's sort of the visual culture that you get to have from people like Diana. It's a long lens culture, right? Yeah. It's a paparazzi. It's a person that is really far, hiding, and making a picture that is just a graphic description of that person and where she is and how she looks, whatever. So when you want to be in the other side and you want to be close, I personally, and I said this to her at the very beginning, this is going to be very intimidating because we're going to be very close. And she was like, yeah, sure. And then in the first time we tested, and she was like, okay. because we shot with film. So what happens is that a film camera, I don't want to bore you with this, but I think it's important. A film camera, the eyepiece would be likely be in the same position where the film is, the gate of the film is, right, where it's being captured. So the lens is here, so we were like this close.
Wow.
So that's how you get, so it's very intimidating.
Well, it's like a big wide angle lens, and so you're getting all this information behind the person, but the proximity is just wild. Like, the Mad Box was,
I was worried to hear.
yeah,
it.
like literally I would be like, I mean, not to be not in character or whatever, but I would consistently, knowing how close they were, be like you're gonna hit me in the face. Like I would just be like there, like with my hands beneath frame, be like, you gotta back up.
And we got close, and that eventually creates something that is very interesting, because if you're very close, it's very intimate, but the closer you are, is the harder to read, right? So it's a strange way of creating history, being really close, but then when you project it, it creates that sort of relationship with the audience, because the audience will wonder what's going on, and we're not delivering all the answers, even though the script and the story sometimes can be very sort of graphic and efficient in what we're saying. You're seeing something that is completely indescribable, and that's just a combination of all the elements.
And how did, I mean, other than fear of personal injury, how did that affect your performance? Like, you know, having this thing there.
I'm not, I know a lot of actors that have rules for themselves, like they don't want to know where the camera is, they don't want to like acknowledge the process, they don't want to stay in their own process. Where you're being looked at, how you're being looked at has so much to do with what you do and how you communicate. That I was obsessed with it because I knew that nothing was being missed. Like usually I'm like, hey, I mean, maybe we should get from over here too. I just, it's almost like, it's like, you know, all of the corresponding shots that are right behind me, it feels so completely first perspective. So I never had to wonder if there were things that were secret for me. Like I wasn't keeping any secrets, whereas sometimes that's just depending on the view of the film. You know, some movies are more objective, some have a really immersive and singular kind of perspective and focus and like way of seeing, and I felt always, there was nothing that I was ever doing or thinking or experiencing that wasn't being caught. And that is definitely like because of the like initial theory and approach to shooting a movie, but it's also because Claire is just like she is a miraculous catcher. I mean, I just couldn't throw anything that she wasn't like, oh, got it. Like, yeah, because sometimes you just go, you know, I don't know if did you see that? Was it enough? Whatever. I just knew no matter what, I could turn around and just run the other way and she would be in front of me somehow.
Yeah, also what happens is that we started sharing the camera, operating with Claire, and then really quickly I just stepped out. And just, it was just Claire and Kristen, and I stopped looking at the monitor. Sometimes you were holding the monitor.
Yeah.
It's a very annoying thing, because it's true. I was just looking at live, you know, because I was feeling what was going on, and I saw it happen. Claire is such and they connected really, really well. It was very beautiful to see.
That's wonderful. We're almost out of time. I have like 10 other things I want to ask. I'm sure the audience has a million things they also want to talk about as well. But I guess that dance sequence has to be tackled. It's such a moment of abandon, and it's such a wonderful break in the movie, and sort of feels like something different for the two of you too, as you're sort of shooting it, the way it's cut, the way your performance acts. I just want to know how that came together and why.
Well, I didn't know why we were doing this for a while until we started doing it. I was like, we're doing a montage in the middle of this movie? Are you kidding me? This is so weird. Like, what is the intention? What am I supposed to be doing? I didn't want to mess this up in any way, obviously. You know, there are huge, you know, you can never do anything like totally perfectly, but I understood the potential, like, absurdity of humiliation that would have been like, you know, if we really dropped all balls on this, it would have sucked. So the things that were more unruly scared me, like the kids stuff, because I can't make them do everything I want them to do. They're alive animals, and then the dance stuff was just so kind of ambiguously written, and ultimately, it was kind of informed by songs that he chose, outfits, locations, rooms, and him kind of saying, like, because this is not a biopic and we can't do everything, this is kind of an opportunity to distill a life. It would be really fun to do every single part of her life, but this was, you know, kind of more of a tone poem. And yeah, he just told me to inhabit the space. And, but what ended up happening? What ended up happening was like every single song you played was so different. It was like, you know, all the best and the worst parts of imagining her life was like kind of found their way in at a certain point because we shot it every single day. Like we would finish our days and always leave like 30 minutes to play around and just find
Sort of a release for you all too, in a way.
Yeah.
There's so much aggression in the character, but I felt that it needed one moment of some release, and we didn't know where it was going to go exactly. So I asked him to kind of write it, and he wrote. It's very, as he said, very ambiguous. And we had this, you know, when you're filming, you have like the more inner circle that you have like chairs and then the monitors and the cameras, and that's where you move around on the set. So we had that and the rack of clothes for the montage. So we were pushing all these clothes. You know,
And the speaker, he's always like,
yeah, and then
this
a
huge
speaker that would hold, you know, with me.
Total nerd.
So super loud, and I would ask her to dance and different music, that some of them were like really high energetic and some of them really low key. And then when we put it together, two things happened, is that I discovered she's a great dancer, we had no choreographer. It was just her doing it. And then Johnny Greenwood came out with that piece of music, it's called Crucifix, and he wrote it, and then we...
Score was stunning.
And then it just came together as that moment in the movie, and I'm grateful we did it.
Well, thank you both for inviting us to this quite extraordinary event.